The day Xiao Mukin decided to marry my cousin as a secondary wife, I took a pill that would make me appear dead. For the last 7 days, I planned to spend some quality time with him. I no longer cried because he stayed out all night, nor did I lose my composure because of Ji Rowan's provocations. At first, Xiao Mukin nodded in satisfaction. You've finally learned to have the temperament of a proper mistress of the house. Later, his gaze became uneasy. Mo, why aren't you losing your temper? I looked at him and smiled faintly. We're family, so naturally, we should live in harmony. 01. After deciding to fake my death and leave the capital, I sought out useful remedies from every source I could. Eventually, I found a young Taoist priest by a small bridge on the outskirts of the city. When he learned of my intentions, he frowned and waved his hand. Madam, I only specialize in feng shui for houses, divination, and fortune-telling. I can't help with making a fake death potion. I threw most of my silver and possessions on the table, hands on my hips. Can you do it or not? The young Taoist stared at the gold and silver on the table for a long time before picking up a brush and writing down a prescription. I looked at the pill I had made from the recipe and remembered the Taoist's words. Take this pill, and after 7 days, you will enter a state of suspended animation. A few days after that, the effect will wear off and you'll awaken. No sooner had I swallowed the pill than someone came to report that Xiao Mukin had gotten into a fight at the Lantern Festival. I was surprised. Why? Xiao Mukin was known for being cold and aloof, usually too lazy to argue with anyone. How could he suddenly get into a fight? The servant stammered. Well, it's just, the young lady wanted a particular lantern, but another young lady wanted the same one. When I heard the words, young lady, I immediately understood. Xiao Mukin was solitary and indifferent, but if something involved his cousin Ji Rowan, it was a different matter. Ji Rowan had only been back for 3 months, yet Xiao Mukin had already shown heroic acts driven by his feelings for her more than once. To avoid her being the subject of gossip, a few days ago, he had decided to take her as his secondary wife. I nodded and replied to the servant. Got it, you can go now. The servant was taken aback and didn't dare to speak further, leaving with a confused look. If it were before, I would have rushed to see if Xiao Mukin was injured. I would have gone to the other person's house to demand justice for him. But now, with just 7 days left before I left, I didn't care anymore. The night grew deeper, and I blew out the lamp, listening to the sound of water dripping from the eaves. Only when dawn broke did I start feeling sleepy. When I woke again, it was because Xiao Mukin had woken me up. He kicked open the door, his voice low. What time is it? And you're still asleep? I rubbed my ears and, with sleepy eyes, looked at his cold, hard face, confused. What's wrong? I didn't know what was wrong with those 3 words, but when Xiao Mukin heard them, his frown deepened even further. What's wrong? Go and see which lady of the house sleeps until noon. Even if your mother isn't here in the mansion, does that mean you can be so undisciplined? I looked at his eyes, which seemed ready to shoot flames, and felt a sense of calm growing in my chest. In the past, I would have gotten up at first light to wash and prepare to greet the elders. Rain or shine, I never missed a day, and my reputation for filial piety spread throughout the capital. But it didn't move my mother-in-law. Now, with only a few days left, and with my mother-in-law not in the mansion, I could do whatever I wanted. But I didn't want to argue with him anymore. Since Ji Rowan had returned and divorced, we had already argued too many times. I looked at him faintly and asked softly, have I delayed something important? If so, tell me and I'll handle it now. Perhaps because I was so calm, Xiao Mukin felt embarrassed and stopped his tantrum. He lowered his eyelids, his voice softer now. Rowan wanted that lantern, but Miss He from the minister's mansion took it. Can you go get it back for her? I frowned slightly, looking at him. He immediately seemed to lose control, raising his voice again. He Yun doesn't even like that lantern. Who doesn't know that you two are as close as sisters, and it was you who instructed her to take it? She caused a scene, and Rowan didn't get the lantern. She also lost face in front of everyone, and was so upset she couldn't sleep all night. If you don't go to get it back, who will? That's when I realized that it had been my good friend, Hee-yun, who had fought with him for the lantern last night. She was doing it to stand up for me. A wave of sourness rushed to my nose. Shao Mukin saw this and snorted. You two work so well together, don't you? She fights your battles in public, bullying others, while you pretend to be innocent and play the victim. I pushed the teacup off the bedside. The fragments scattered across the floor. You can talk about me, but I won't allow anyone to say anything bad about Hee-yun. Perhaps because I was usually so calm, my sudden outburst caught Shao Mukin off guard. I called for Chunta to help me get dressed and washed. Then I turned my cold gaze back to Shao Mukin, standing by the door. I'll bring the lantern back, but if I hear another word slandering Hee-yun— I didn't finish my sentence, just staring at him. He avoided my gaze. If she returns the lantern, I won't say anything about her. 02. As soon as I entered the back courtyard of the minister's residence, I overheard Hee-yun loudly cursing Shao Mukin. When she saw me, she quickly ran up to me, her eyes gleaming with pride. Mo, last night I scolded Ji Rowan on the street. Look. She gestured toward the side with her eyes. A delicately crafted rabbit-shaped lantern was hanging nearby. This is the one I got for you. Ji Rowan wanted it, but I refused to give it to her. She was pleased with herself. I felt both touched and heartbroken. The minister values his reputation above all, and for her to make such a scene, she would surely be scolded by her father. I shook her arm gently. Give it to her. Hee-yun's smile froze, and she shrugged off my arm. No. She turned her head away from me, remaining silent for a moment before speaking quietly. Clearly, you are the rightful wife of the Marquis, yet she deliberately makes Shao Mukin accompany her for street outings every day, plainly trying to embarrass you. You'd be better off letting someone deal with her instead of just giving in. You never used to let anyone bully you. She was talking about the lantern, but not just about the lantern. I knew she was speaking up for me. I moved forward and gently embraced her. Don't be angry, let me tell you a secret. The Shao family is an old noble family. Although their power has waned with the generation of Shao Mukin, their foundation still stands. Hee-yun's conflict with Shao Mukin might have been a trivial matter between younger generations. But if it spread to the court, it would become a political struggle between the minister's house and the Duke of Yongyang's house. I couldn't let Hee-yun's family be harmed because of me. I took the lantern and walked back. From afar, I could already hear the noise at home. Without asking, I knew Ji Rowan had arrived again. Sure enough, as soon as I entered, there she was. Ji Rowan, in a peach-colored gown with flowing sleeves, was dancing gracefully to the sound of Shao Mukin's flute. When she saw me, she seemed startled and stumbled into Shao Mukin's arms, her head gently nuzzling against his chest. Shao Mukin patted her back and comforted her. Don't be afraid, I'm here. I couldn't help but curl my lips into a mocking smile. I placed the lantern on a pearwood table and turned to leave. Wait. I stopped. Ji Rowan is here, and you didn't even greet her. Is this how you treat guests? Shao Mukin's eyes were filled with disappointment. Impulsive and rude, with no manners at all. Mo, you really need to learn how to behave properly from Rowan. His tone was deep. In an instant, I thought back to the past. The year we first returned to the capital, when people gossiped about his father, I had stormed into that person's house with a whip. By the time Shao Mukin arrived, I had already made the person apologize repeatedly. Seeing Shao Mukin, that person looked relieved and said, Shao Darren, is this your wife? She's so arrogant and rude, with no manners. Shao Mukin froze for a moment, then clapped his hands in admiration. Mo is truly the master of the Shao family, imposing and extraordinary. I'm truly lucky to have her as my wife. Back then, he always looked at me with admiration in his eyes. When had that admiration been replaced with disappointment? I turned around, about to speak. But before I could, Ji Rowan had already stepped closer to Shao Mukin, stroking his back and telling him not to be upset. My younger sister is from the southern border, and she's unfamiliar with the etiquette of the capital. It's only natural. I'll guide her more in the future. Shao Mukin looked at her, his eyes full of tenderness. Rowan, you're so thoughtful. He then looked back at me. From today, Rowan will stay in the residence. She'll help you manage the household. You should learn from her. Stop being so petty and jealous like before. Once Rowan moves in, we'll be one family.
Don't.
Fine. Xiao Mukin's voice suddenly stopped, and he frowned at me. What did you say? I raised a smile and said in a calm tone. I said, I will help my husband bring the cousin-in-law into the house in a grand and proper manner so that everyone will be satisfied. He lowered his eyes. After a moment of silence, he slowly spoke. At least you're showing some leadership qualities now. If only you had been like this earlier, everyone would be happy. I felt numb inside. Yes, it should have been like this long ago. Jirowan's gaze quickly darted between us. She came forward, taking my hand. In that case, I'll thank you in advance, sister. I gently pulled my hand away. I wiped my hand vigorously with my sleeve, where she had just grabbed it. I'll make the guest list this afternoon and give it to my husband for review later tonight. With that, I turned and left, ignoring the laughter behind me. In 6 days, none of this will matter to me anymore. 04. I had compiled the guest list across 3 full pages. From dukes and marquises to distant relatives outside the capital. When Xiao Mukin came to my room that evening, I had just finished writing the last name. I handed it to him casually. He took it and read it carefully, hesitating. Do we really need to invite so many people? I answered. Since we're going all out, the more, the merrier. Xiao Mukin looked me up and down. Mo, don't worry. Although Wan is entering as a concubine, her position in the house will never surpass yours. I will keep the promises I made to you. I couldn't help but laugh. How could promises already broken still be kept? I shook my head and smiled lightly. Don't worry, we're all family now. There was a flicker of joy in his eyes. Mo, why do I feel like you're different from before? Before, I too became lost in my thoughts. When Xiao Mukin caused a huge scene to defend Jirowan, who was performing in a brothel, I heard her name for the first time from gossipers at a tavern. I heard that Xiao young master and Miss Ji were childhood sweethearts. If the Xiao family hadn't been banished to Lingnan a few years ago, they would have been married by now. He scolded the gossips harshly, but I was shaken to the core. Xiao Mukin was usually calm and unruffled, but now, someone who could make him lose control and defend her must have a special place in his heart. I gripped Hyun's sleeve and asked, since you grew up in the capital, is what they said true? Hyun, gently fixing my messy hair, spoke with reluctance. That was in the past. Now, you are the wife of the Marquis. Everyone can see how grandly Xiao young master treats you and how much he cares for you. Mo, don't overthink it. That night, I returned home in a daze, drinking cup after cup of tea. By the time it was the 3rd watch, Xiao Mukin finally returned, injured. When he saw me, his gaze flickered, and he asked why I hadn't gone to sleep yet. I kept my tone steady, helping him apply medicine as I gently asked, I heard you got into a big fight today. I'm really worried what happened. He paused, then grabbed my hand. He said Jirowan was his cousin. She had married the wrong man and was now a disgraced woman, treated as an outcast. Now, she had fallen into hardship and was being harassed in the brothel. He couldn't ignore her. Xiao Mukin had always had a gentleman's heart, which I had always known. It was precisely because of this that I liked him. I nodded, pushing down my unease, and carefully tended to his wounds. I had thought it was just an act of chivalry, but I hadn't expected it to be the beginning of us drifting apart. He bought Jirowan's freedom, arranged a new house, and hired servants for her. At my birthday banquet, he hurriedly left to see Jirowan, who had fallen into the water. Birthdays come every year, but now Jirowan's life is at risk. He took the fabrics and jewelry I had ordered and gave them to Jirowan, who he had also taken a liking to. You're the Marquis's wife. You can have whatever you want, but let's give this to Wanwan first. When I was attacked by bandits on the way back from praying in the outskirts of the capital and broke my leg, I had someone call for him to come help. He was comforting Jirowan, who had lost a pet. He even used my injury as an excuse to take Jirawan to the royal hunt. At first, I pitied Jirawan's misfortune and kept yielding. But later, I realized that everything related to Xiaomyukin, Jirawan wanted to take from me. Xiaomyukin always wanted me to be the one to step back. I argued, fought, and made a scene. With so many servants in the house, did Jirawan really need him to attend to her every time something happened? At first, Xiaomyukin would gently calm me, saying I misunderstood. He apologized and promised to be more careful in the future to avoid gossip. But gradually, I became the jealous and petty woman in his eyes. Gu Qingma, you really can't be reasoned with. He learned to storm out, not return at night. This was his way of punishing and warning me. Until recently, at the Duke of the State's birthday banquet, when a young noble teased Jirawan for being the discarded wife of a criminal, she cried with red eyes. Xiaomyukin fought again. When he came back that day, he told me, I want to marry Wanwan as a concubine. I want her to live with dignity in this world. That was when my heart completely died. Xiaomyukin called my name, and I snapped out of my memories. Mo, I'm marrying Wanwan. Aren't you angry? There was a flicker of unease in his eyes. I hesitated for a moment, smiled, and shook my head. Miss G and you have a childhood bond, and she's also a cousin to the Marquis family. Now that she's able to enter the house, it's a good thing, isn't it? I looked out at the dark night, feeling calm in my heart. With that, it's a great thing. How could I be angry? But you used to. Before, it was all my fault. I shouldn't have been jealous. I looked up at him. It won't happen again. I was serious. Seeing that he wanted to say something, I interrupted him and looked at the guest list in his hand. Did you forget anyone? His eyelashes fluttered, and the spark of inquiry in his eyes finally died down. Mo, you've already thought of everything. Mo, you've really changed so much over the years. I still remember when we first married, you didn't even recognize the noble families. Now you handle everything so meticulously. He sighed deeply, as if content. I remained silent. The matter seemed settled, but Xiaomyukin didn't seem to want to leave. I signaled to my maid. She bravely spoke up. My lord, it's getting late. You should rest. Unexpectedly, her words caused Xiaomyukin's face to darken instantly. Where else should I sleep if not in my wife's room? But you haven't slept here for a month. Xiaomyukin dismissed the maid sharply. Now I was left utterly confused. I looked at him in bewilderment. He avoided my gaze. Mo, let's wash up and rest. 05. I couldn't sleep. I just couldn't sleep. I had already gotten used to sleeping alone, but now, with someone breathing beside me, it felt terribly uncomfortable. I don't know how many times I tossed and turned, but then suddenly, Xiaomyukin's arm landed on me. I jumped with a start. The little bit of sleepiness I had vanished instantly. Why can't you sleep? His voice, still muddled with sleep, held a hint of concern. I didn't answer. Just as I thought this quiet moment would last until he fell asleep, Xiaomyukin reached out with one arm and pulled me into his embrace. Then, with his other hand, he gently patted my back. Will this help you sleep? The familiar yet unfamiliar action. I felt on edge. In an instant, I leapt out of bed and landed on the floor. In the dim light, Xiaomyukin's gaze slowly cleared, his brows furrowed. He suppressed his anger. Mo, what exactly do you want? I swear, I really didn't want anything. I lit a candle. Clenching my fists, I stared at him seriously. You and Miss G are getting married soon. I don't want her to misunderstand if she finds out you're staying here. Her condition might worsen. Lord, perhaps you should go back to Miss G's room. He suddenly threw off the blanket. His clear eyes flashed with anger in the dark. Misunderstand? Misunderstand what? Misunderstand that because you have me, you no longer care about her. I blurted it out. The words fell, and the silence was palpable. The candle flickered. He looked slightly awkward. Mo, you heard that? I smiled bitterly. Yes, I heard it. 06. A few days ago, Xiao Mukin brought Ji Ruwan to our house. In the back garden, they were chatting and laughing. When talking about Ji Ruwan's days in the brothel after being wronged, she started crying. She sobbed and asked, "What if Gu Qingmo doesn't let you marry me?" Xiao Mukin remained silent. Ji Ruwan cried harder, pounding on his chest. "Is it because of Gu Qingmo that you no longer care about me? Do you still remember the promise we made when we were young? Or do you think I'm tainted because I married someone else? But that was my parents' decision. I had no choice, Mu Chen." Xiao Mukin pulled her into his arms, softly comforting her. "How could I not care about you? I remember the promise we made as children. You will always be the one I care about most." Not far away, by the pond, I sat silently with my maid, fishing. After they left, my maid whispered to me, "Madam, don't be upset. When Lord Xiao comforts someone, he doesn't mean everything he says." Seeing my expression remain unchanged, she became anxious. "Do you remember? When the daughter of the Minister of Personnel mocked you for not knowing etiquette, Lord Xiao was furious and ordered that she never be allowed to enter our household again." Her voice grew softer. "Madam,
Please say something."
don't scare me." My fishing pole suddenly sank. I quickly reeled it in. A plump fish had bitten the hook. I clapped my hands happily at my maid. "How about we have grilled fish tonight?" I was planning to leave here pretending to be dead, and I was too lazy to bring it up anymore. But I didn't expect. Today, I ended up saying it without realizing. Even though Xiao Mukin already knew Ji Ruwan had ruined the engagement and married someone else to avoid being implicated by the Xiao family. Whenever he faced his childhood sweetheart, he became soft-hearted and lacked principles. He raised his hand, cleared his throat lightly. "Mo, about that time? No need to explain." I quickly stopped him, taking a deep breath and forcing a smile. "I understand you've explained it many times. Miss Ji was wronged, and after being implicated, she suffered greatly. You couldn't just ignore her. I understand all of that." I thought to myself, this must be the magnanimous mistress Xiao Mukin wanted me to be. But strangely, as I kept talking, his gaze seemed to grow dimmer and dimmer. I was confused. Did I say something wrong? He shook his head, a strange smile curling at the corner of his mouth. "You're right, Mo, truly virtuous." I nodded happily. "That's good. Now go, or Miss Ji will really misunderstand."
07.
5 days later, it was the day Ji Ruwan would officially enter the household. It was also the day I would fake my death. Time was tight, and there was no way to prepare everything in detail. Clothes, jewelry, ingredients, and pastries for the banquet, and decorations for the courtyard. The servants came one by one to ask me for decisions. I couldn't take it anymore and ordered, "Just ask Miss Ji. Whatever she wants is fine." The servants exchanged looks. "But you are the mistress of the house." "It's fine." I shook my head. "Miss Ji is coming in as a concubine. She will still be the mistress here. Let's all get used to it." The servants left, whispering, "Why does our mistress look like she's lost all her fighting spirit?" Lord Xiao dotes on Miss Ji so much. It's probably because the mistress wants to avoid clashing with her. I pretended not to hear. Meanwhile, Heian quietly moved my dowry to the southern border. The day of the wedding arrived, and it was still dark, but the whole house was already busy. The place was decorated with lanterns, the red light blinding. I woke up early and stood in the corridor, answering the servants' requests one by one. I didn't know when Xiao Mukin had arrived. "Why are you up so early?" "These past few days, Miss Ji has been handling the household affairs. Today she's the bride, she shouldn't have to work anymore." I looked at him, confused. "Why are you still wearing your usual clothes?" I turned to Chun Tao. "Hasn't the Lord's wedding attire been delivered?" "It was sent yesterday," Chun Tao quickly explained. I frowned, confused as I looked at Xiao Mukin. Today was his big day, but he didn't look happy. He lowered his eyelids. "I don't like that wedding attire."
Huh.
I couldn't help but tilt my head, not knowing what Xiao Mukin was up to this time. "It's too late to buy a new one now." I patiently tried to persuade him. Why don't we just prepare a better one for next time? Xiao Mukin's face darkened even more. Next time? I froze, realizing. There won't be a next time. I misspoke. With Miss G, you naturally don't need to bring anyone else into the house. Before I could finish, Xiao Mukin kicked over a lantern on the corridor floor. The servants who had been busy cleaning up screamed when they saw the lantern fall. At moments like this, you really can't help but laugh. Xiao Mukin, what do you want to do? I want to wear the wedding attire from our wedding. Hearing this, I was momentarily stunned. I remembered the day of our wedding. 08. The old Marquis was known for his upright character. He pleaded on behalf of a friend who was a criminal in court, which angered the emperor, leading to his exile to the southern region. The next day, upon hearing the news of his friend's execution, he felt an immense sorrow and, unable to bear the injustice of the world, he took his own life. His son, Xiao Mukin, then succeeded him as the county magistrate. However, in our small town in the southern region, the local customs were wild, and it was a case of a powerful dragon not being able to suppress the local snake. Xiao Mukin insisted on reforms, angering the wealthy merchants. They hired mountain bandits, planning to end his life when he passed through the mountain roads. It was my father, a retired wandering hero, who saved Xiao Mukin and his mother. He sheltered them in our home to avoid further danger. In his long robes, he looked like the pine trees on the mountain, handsome and aloof, like the bright moon in the sky. I was moved when I looked at Xiao Mukin's face. My father, however, had no interest in meddling in such worldly disputes. Fortunately, from a young age, my father had taught me martial arts. Later, when Xiao Mukin continued to handle the cases, I stayed by his side, helping him fend off the local thugs' knives and swords. I watched as he saved kidnapped girls, helped elderly people with no homes, cleared wasteland to increase food production, and built roads and bridges, opening trade routes with other regions. Although it was a difficult journey, he succeeded in the end. Through our daily struggles together, we secretly vowed to be together forever. After Xiao Mukin's family name was cleared and he rose in position, I followed him back to the capital. He insisted on holding a grand ceremony to welcome me into his family. He wanted everyone in the capital to know that the Xiao family had not fallen and that I was his wife. In our southern town, the bride's wedding gown must be embroidered by the bride herself for a marriage to be long-lasting. But my father allowed me to travel with him, and from a young age, I didn't like embroidery, so he never forced me to learn it. However, I believed in that beautiful legend and wanted to personally embroider my wedding gown for Xiao Mukin. The best wedding seamstress taught me embroidery for 3 whole months. My hands were pricked by needles over 1,000 times. When the wedding gown was finally finished, under the red candles, Xiao Mukin held my hand and blew on it gently, swearing that he would love me forever and never leave. He vowed that if he ever broke that promise, thunder would strike him down. But promises, after all, are the most illusory things. As I recalled these memories, I looked at Xiao Mukin. His eyes were filled with thoughts, complicated and hard to read. I asked, "Do you really have to wear that wedding gown to welcome Ji Rawan into the family?" A glimmer of joy flashed in his eyes as he nodded. "I must." Something in my heart seemed to shatter lightly. I sighed. "All right then, wait for me." I started to walk away, and strangely, I felt Xiao Mukin's gaze following me. I quickened my steps. He must have been eager to move forward. 09. The guests arrived in droves. I welcomed and bid farewell to people in the crowd. Some elders praised the beauty of the banquet I organized. Some younger noble women looked at me with sympathy. "Gu Qingma, you really don't mind that Xiao Marquis is marrying Ji Rawan?" They seemed to ponder. "When you first arrived in the capital, you didn't understand the proper etiquette, and we teased you. But now, seeing you being bullied by others, I feel uncomfortable for you." One of the older women tried to comfort me. "Don't be upset, madam. Men are all like that. They love whoever is in front of them. It's not worth getting angry about. What's more important is that we live our own lives well." I thanked them one by one and then sat down amidst everyone's gaze. In the seat next to Xiao Mukin, Ji Rawan, dressed in a fiery red wedding gown, entered with the help of her maidservants. She offered me tea. I hope you will take care of me in the future, sister. I didn't avoid it and accepted her salute. The lid of the teacup slowly brushed the rim of the cup as I smiled. As a relative, you are the Marquis's cousin, and in terms of seniority, you and the Marquis are childhood sweethearts. I truly can't accept being called sister. Upon hearing this, Jirawan's eyes flashed with pride, and she looked at Xiaomyukin. Xiaomyukin cleared his throat. Just as I took a sip of tea, I suddenly pressed my stomach. A mouthful of blood sprayed far out. I looked at Jirawan, my eyes filled with suspicion and infinite sorrow. Did you poison the tea? Jirawan's earlier pleased expression immediately stiffened, and she quickly denied it. Another mouthful of blood spilled from my lips, and I painfully looked at Xiaomyukin, who was holding me. Did you poison it? Xiaomyukin froze. Tears slipped down my face. I've already agreed to let you marry your cousin, who was once a prostitute, as a concubine. I've already handed over the management of the backyard to Jirawan. Why? Why can't you both tolerate me? The sorrow in my eyes was endless, like a woman tortured by love. Xiaomyukin's pupils dilated, and he screamed for a doctor. Jirawan also looked at him in shock, murmuring, "Mukin, do you really love me this much?" My mind grew foggy, and my lips curved into a slight smile. Before I left, I'd send you both a pot. Before I fell into a deep sleep, I could only hear Hee-yun yelling angrily.
10.
The death-inducing drug had already taken effect. When I woke up again, I found myself in a coffin. I was conscious, but unable to open my eyes. Through the wooden planks, I could hear the noise outside. I listened carefully. Hee-yun wanted to send my coffin back to Lingnan, but Xiaomyukin stopped him. He shouted angrily, "Mo is my wife. Why should you handle her funeral?" Hee-yun, undeterred, retorted, "Because I am her best sister, while you are just a man who has changed his heart." She sneered, "Xiaomyukin, now you remember that Mo is your wife? When you turned her into a joke of the entire capital for the sake of a condemned official's abandoned wife, did you ever think of her as your wife? Perhaps you've forgotten, Mo isn't just your wife. She's also the savior of you and your mother's lives, yet how did you treat her?" I listened quietly, my heart filled with sadness and calm. Even after we returned to the capital and got married, my mother-in-law never liked me. She thought I was from a lowly background and unworthy of marrying into the Marquis household. After my marriage to Xiaomyukin, the young ladies in the capital mocked me. At first, I didn't care. Anyone who bullied me, I would get my revenge. It was during this time that I became friends with Hee-yun. She had once seen me tie the daughter of the Minister of Rights to a tree and laugh out loud. "Gu Qingma, you're interesting. You're not like those delicate, fake young ladies." Xiaomyukin never forced me to learn etiquette. When I offended someone, he would take care of the aftermath for me. But while I could ignore outsiders' words, I couldn't help but care about my mother-in-law's scorn. "Marrying a country bumpkin like you makes my son lose face every day. How can he stand in the official circles?" I started to change. Etiquette, managing the household, painting, and embroidery. All the things I once hated, I forced myself to learn. Xiaomyukin didn't want me to continue, but I insisted. I didn't want him to marry me and feel ashamed, to be ridiculed. But when I had learned all these so-called high society manners, Ji Ruwan returned. It seemed that these things didn't matter anymore. Now, after hearing Hee-yun's words, the people around us couldn't help but speak up. "Xiao, you should let Hee-yun take Mo back. She's really been so unhappy and in pain recently." "Yes, Madame Gu's death was caused by the poison you and Ji Ruwan designed. How can you still stop her?" "No." Xiaomyukin clung tightly to the coffin. He no longer explained the poison. He stubbornly refused to let anyone lift the coffin. The crowd murmured. I lay inside, heart pounding with urgency. Xiaomyukin had a problem. A big one. The procession to deliver the coffin from the Ministry of Personnel grew louder and messier, and I could barely hear Xiaomyukin's voice. Suddenly, a loud crash rang out, followed by a quiet stillness. Hyun's voice came again. Xiaomyukin, do you remember the promise you made to Mo before our wedding? Through the coffin, I couldn't see Xiaomyukin's reaction. Someone asked what promise Hyun was referring to. I became dazed, as though I had returned to that wedding night. My father had originally disapproved of my marriage to Xiaomyukin. It was only after he endured numerous lashings and beatings from my father that he finally agreed. But my father wasn't optimistic about our life in the capital. So on our wedding night, I made Xiaomyukin promise me, if one day I wanted to leave, he must let me go. With this guarantee, it seemed I no longer needed the death-inducing drug to cause any more turmoil. But I didn't dare take the risk. I didn't want to remain alive, lingering in his thoughts and causing more entanglement in the future. Hyun probably pulled out the document Xiaomyukin had signed that night. Xiao, look, one letter is from Mo to you. The other is your own promise. If you stop now, it means Mo will never find peace, even in death. Suddenly, everything outside grew silent. The first to speak was my maid, Chun Tao, crying out, Master, please let Madam go. She's been so unhappy and suffering at the Marquis residence. She cries every day and can't sleep at night. Master, you have a new wife now. Please let Madam go. Tears silently slipped down. If Xiaomyukin opened the envelope now, he would see my final words to him. Xiaomyukin, I lied to you before. The poison was mine. I wanted to leave you forever, never to meet again. The coffin was lifted again, slowly swaying and moving. My tense heart finally relaxed. 11. 5 years later. My father returned from the town with a letter Hyun had sent. Nyo followed behind him, hiding and playing, having fun. I finished pounding new rice, washed my hands, and opened the letter. The first line made me instantly drop the paper in shock. Hyun's familiar handwriting fell to the ground. Mo, I accidentally exposed everything. Xiaomyukin found out you're still alive. My heart tightened instantly. I took a deep breath and tried to calm myself. It had been 5 years. So what if he found out? He already had a new wife and child. I raised my head to see where Nyo had gone. Just then, I saw a man in a green robe, standing tall at the door. Our gazes met for a moment, and I immediately turned away. The footsteps behind me grew closer, until a voice sounded above my head. Mo, so you really are still alive. Xiaomyukin's voice was hoarse, filled with emotion. I sighed silently, lifted my head to look at him, and said, Sir, you've mistaken me for someone else. He smiled bitterly. I know you haven't forgiven me. Mo. Memories from a past life suddenly came rushing in. What had once been a calm heart now stirred with waves. I stood up and walked toward the room, firmly closing the door behind me. Through the wood, I calmly told him,
Please leave now.
Don't disturb my life. Xiaomyukin stood outside the door for a long time before leaving. When I opened the door again, my father and Nyo were coming back from outside. Seeing me, my father furrowed his brow slightly. He came to find you? I silently nodded. What do you think? It's already over. My father nodded, lifting Nyo high, joking as they went toward the kitchen. Let's make something delicious for your little greedy cat of a mother. Shame on you, mother. You're still a little greedy cat at this age. Nyo stuck her tongue out at me, and I pretended to be fierce and pounced on her. An hour later, the three of us ate dinner under the candlelight. The moonlight above was soft and bright. Everything was perfect and didn't need to change.
12.
It was a few days later that I learned that Xiaomyukin had requested a transfer to Lingnan. 5 years had changed a lot. Xiaomyukin's mother had passed away. He said, Before my mother passed, she kept calling your name. He said, I know it wasn't Ji Rubin who poisoned you, but I chose to turn a blind eye. This was the punishment you left for her and me, making us the targets of public scorn. I won't escape from it. I pretended not to hear. After a long silence, Xiaomyukin seemed to be in great pain as he buried his face in his hands. Mo, I know everything was my fault. I don't have the face to beg for your forgiveness, but I just want you not to drive me away from your side, okay? I didn't respond. Even for Nyo-Nyo's sake, at least let her recognize me. That way, she would be the daughter of the county magistrate, and when she grows up, there would be suitors. Nyo-Nyo is happy now. I interrupted him. Nyo-Nyo doesn't think there's anything wrong with being a country girl. I stared at him seriously, speaking slowly. So, please, Mr. Xiao, do not disturb our mother-daughter life any longer. But Xiao Mukin didn't listen. Every now and then, there would be food or toys outside my door. I threw everything away. One day, by chance, Nyo-Nyo saw some of the little toys inside. She wanted to play with them, so I kept them. He appeared at my door so many times. Even Nyo-Nyo noticed something unusual. Mom, why does that uncle always come and bring us things? I smiled softly. He's our local official. It's normal for him to send things. Nyo-Nyo nodded as if she understood, but then asked, then why doesn't he send things to Grandma Li or Grandpa Zhao's house? Dad teased her with a feather duster. Of course, it's because our Nyo-Nyo is so cute. Nyo-Nyo giggled and began to play with Dad. Before leaving, Dad quietly looked back at me as if to say, Mo, don't worry, I'm here. A lump formed in my throat. Apart from Dad and Nyo-Nyo, nothing else really mattered. 13. In the 30 years Xiao Mukin served as an official in Lingnan, the people lived peacefully and prosperously, and the town's politics were clear and transparent. Xiao Mukin thought for the people, diligently handling the paperwork. He finally passed away before his 51st birthday. The people who came to send him off filled both sides of the road. Everyone said he was a good official who never married and had no children. His hands were empty, his contributions immeasurable. Nyo-Nyo and I were also in the crowd. She supported me and smiled, asking, Mom, do you think Mr. Xiao is a good man? Paper money fluttered in the air, some falling in front of me. It seemed like Xiao Mukin's gaze, his sigh. My eyes were already clouded, watching the coffin containing his body gradually disappear in the sound of the suona. The setting sun painted half the sky red. I didn't want to comment on Xiao Mukin's deeds or faults.
14.
When I passed away, the ceremony was performed by a young Taoist from that year. Nyo-Nyo asked him why he had traveled so far to send me off. He said, I was once from Lingnan too. On my way north to the capital, I was ambushed by bandits and nearly died. It was Miss Gu who saved my life. Now, I'm just repaying the favor.